Party with your host, Dustin Rybka.
Hello and welcome to Sex Party. I'm your host, Dustin Rybka. This is episode 47. My guest this week, Emily Duncan. Emily is a certified sexologist from Australia. We talk about a lot of things in this episode. We talk about the differences between America and Australia with sex, with abortion rights, with reproductive rights. You guys are going to be really surprised. We also talk about the benefits of a healthy masturbation practice, the benefits of sex toys, blowjob machines. We talk about what got Emily into this work. It's a phenomenal episode, if I don't say so myself. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Emily Duncan.
This week's conversation.
Emily Duncan, welcome to Sex Party. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, actually. I'm well, and it feels good to say that. Thank you for asking.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. I think right away everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, she's Australian, so you're in Australia." It's 4 p.m. there, you said.
Yeah.
I can even see the sunlight around you, and you're not even near a window. So I think it's what everyone pictures when they picture Australia. But for the people who don't know who you are, they don't know what you do. Who are you, and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name's Emily Duncan. My pronouns are she, her. I'm 22 and I'm a certified sexologist. So I am based in a place called Geelong. It's like an hour from Melbourne. That's where I imagine most people will know. And yeah, I just launched a business, Emily Duncan Sexology. So it's basically sex coaching. So supporting people with their sex, sexuality and relationships. And yeah, that's me basically.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Right out of the gate, what do you think is annoying, just in general, right? Like that people say about Australians, right? Is it like another shrimp on the Barbie or some bullshit, or is it down under? Like, what are you sick of hearing about your Australian?
That's a great question. I don't know. I feel like I don't meet many people outside of Australia who are like shit talking Australians or like, saying these things. I guess the one thing is that like Australia has all these like big scary creatures and like it's just like, there's snakes everywhere and spiders everywhere and it's just like, terrifying. They're there, but I don't think it's as bad as people say. That's probably the main thing. I feel like all the other stuff, like, I mean, it's all kind of true, except for the shrimp on the Barbie. I grew up thinking that was British. I did not know that was an Australian thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people in America, like we don't mean to be offensive, or we're like quite offensive all the time, but like we say things, we think it's cool or something. I think our only exposure to Australia is like, the fucking cliche, like Crocodile Dundee and shit.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like saying those taglines like, shut the fuck up, whatever. So I just think it's funny to like hear from someone who's in Australia, like this stuff that they're like, all right, enough of the shrimp on the Barbie stuff. Come on.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a sexologist. What is that? What is that like? What does that entail? Can you explain to the audience what it is to be a sexologist?
Yeah, so basically as a sexologist, we're kind of like an expert on human sexuality. I feel like we kind of sit in between like a sex therapist and a sex educator. So we can do both. But it kind of depends then on our other qualifications. So I have a background in psych, so I'm more like the sex therapy end. But there's a lot of us who are educators, will work in schools doing sex education and doing like health promotion programs. But yeah, we basically are just like experts on all things sex and sexuality. So really just supporting you to have the most knowledge you can about sex, tools, resources, so that you can maximize your sexual wellness, basically.
No, that's awesome. And immediately you talked about sex education, right? And so in America, our sex education is fucked. It's not flawed. It's like totally fucked. And
Yep.
people get like really political about it. I always tell the story on the show. short version. A teacher tried to put a condom like on a banana, and like it was like an uproar. People were outside protesting. It was a mess. Are those things happening with sex education in Australia? Do people get really worked up?
No, not too bad. I think our main problem's around consent at the moment. There's been a lot of work this year on like consent and protests around consent, trying to get that implemented in schools. So there's been a lot of backlash with that because there's been a lot of issues with like the private schools and the private school boys. So there's been a lot of backlash on that. But when it comes to like I guess the sex ed basics, there's not as much of an uproar. Like it's generally in schools. The only times when we have problems with that has been more religious schools. But anytime that there's been something that has been, I guess, if anything, it's the opposite. Anytime there's been something that's inappropriate on the school's end, where like they will say something that goes against, inclusive sex education or shame sexuality, and it gets put into the media and they receive a backlash. So if anything, it's kind of the opposite. I feel like we've definitely been moving towards a more progressive like sex education. However, it still fucking sucks.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting because there are big differences in America and everywhere else, but in this case Australia, and I really want to key into those throughout the episode. So I think it's crazy because here you're right, it's totally the opposite. If you you go the inclusive route, boom, like religious fucking weirdos outside the school and dudes with guns and shit, whatever, conspiracy theories. And nowhere is perfect, but there are places that are better on certain topics. And I know from where we're at in America that Australia has this better system of like, you guys have already moved on to consent. America won't get to consent until like 30, 39 or something like that.
Yeah. From everything I've seen, it just seems to only be going backwards. Like every step forward, you're taking two back.
Yeah, usually that's how it works. You do take a step forward and then there's six backwards. So it's like, I think to highlight those differences is fucking really valuable because, it's not like this everywhere else, right? And that being said, what, like, in your knowledge of America with sexuality, right? Like, what are some of the key differences that you notice from Australia to America? And if you don't know a lot, that's fine. I can fill you in.
Yeah, see, the only things I see are like the headlines or the people that I follow on social media who are in America. And so, like, the main things that, like, I have just been seeing, like, the issues with how drag queens are going to turn all your kids gay at the moment. And, like, that I think the abortion laws have been a massive thing that we've seen in Australia because we were all just, like, could not comprehend that one. We were like, how is this even happening? But I guess I feel like when it came to like sexuality, America seemed a bit more progressive in like just being more accepted in some ways, like, and being able to be out as like gay and things. And like the LGBT community just seemed bigger. And I think you guys were ahead of us there. However, I feel like we've caught up and it's now, not a big of a difference. But I feel like, if anything, I just see the negative that comes out of America when it comes to like sexuality and just, things like the abortion laws, and I've been seeing lots of like that drag queens and things like that.
So what are the abortion laws in Australia?
Yeah, so everybody has access to abortion, to my knowledge. Basically, it changes in each state within Australia, but like you generally can go to a doctor within a certain time frame and get an abortion. So it's, accessible for everybody. The only times it might get a bit, I guess, messy is if you're of like a certain age and might need parental consent. Or you're past a certain week. I think some states doctors can say no, but they have to then refer you to somebody who can actually provide that service.
Yeah, wow, that's a world of difference to where we are here in America. And how would you say that affects the quality of life, right? Do you see people because the argument here is like, okay, well then people are just gonna use like abortion as like a way of like getting rid of the baby, a way of like being safe and get, instead of using a condom, they're just going to use abortions. It's like, dude, that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. So I wonder if you could say in a country where it is legal in most places, right, within a time frame, it's all been worked out, there isn't an uproar about it, how is that affecting quality of life? Is everyone using abortion as birth control in Australia?
God, no, absolutely not. Because like nobody wants to have an abortion. Like nobody wants to put themselves through that experience or have to have that moment of, okay, I can take two paths. I can either have a child potentially or not. Like nobody wants to be in that situation. I feel like, I don't know if it's just my generation, we still suck at using condoms. I feel like everybody just generally sucks at using condoms.
Sure.
But like we're good with the morning after pill and other things. And like abortion is like the last resort. And also like, yeah, I have not met a single person who has been like, this is my plan A. Abortion is plan A.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's really, really important to get you on record saying that, right? Because again, like, hey, it doesn't have to be like this. Look at Australia, right? So I think that's really important with sex, and with your work with sex. Are you talking about reproductive rights a lot? What are being a sexologist, right? Like, what are some of your personal favorite topics around sex?
Yeah, well, to answer the first part, we honestly aren't talking about reproductive rights because we have them, so it's not really a conversation. But my favorite topics, definitely pleasure. I love like empowering vulva owners, women in particular, to like enjoy sex, take control, work out what you actually, like, masturbate, have casual sex, do all the, all the fun things, step out of your comfort zone, be curious. Like I love just women stepping into their power when it comes to their sexuality. I think that's a big one. Also a pretty big one, like STIs and sexual health, because that's how I got into this. So that's, I think, another like important part of my work that I guess I enjoy talking about.
Yeah, I mean, and you led like right into my next question, right? Like, what is it about sex? Like, what is your origin story there? Like, what happened to you that made you think, oh shit, like this is great to talk about, or I'm terrified of this, I want to know more?
Yeah, so it was chlamydia. God bless chlamydia. So I contracted chlamydia when I was 18, and I was like, oh shit, this happens. I was like, oh, it happened to me. I'm like, no. So I contracted chlamydia off an ex-boyfriend, and then because was not educated on it, and like I knew like signs, symptoms, everything, like being told how not to get it, but nobody teaches you what to do when you contract an STI. And like the stats in Australia are like 1 in 2 under 25 are going to contract one. So you need to know what to do when you contract an STI. So I instantly noticed like I do not know how to do this. The doctors were kind of just like, oh, you can use this like anonymous text line to tell like the people that you've had sex with that you've contracted chlamydia. And I was like, but it's my boyfriend. I can't just send an anonymous text to my boyfriend. So I had to have that conversation, but then I didn't have another follow-up conversation that we were positive. So that therefore meant that I contracted it again because he didn't go and do the right things and get the right treatment, which I just assumed that that's what somebody would do. So then I contracted chlamydia again, then it turned into pelvic inflammatory disease. Then I had to have a laparoscopy, so surgery to like have a look around, see if there's any damage because I was still having pain. So it just turned into this like big thing. And I was like, okay, I'm 18, 19. Nobody knows how to talk about this around me. Like even if I want to talk about it, people don't know how to support me or have this conversation because it's so stigmatized and they also haven't been given this knowledge. And I also it was one of those topics that the more I knew, the more I realized I didn't know. And I was like, holy shit, like, why are we not talking about this? So I just did a big deep dive, especially on social media, found out sexologists exist, found out that there's this whole sex positive world and sex positive uprising. And I was like, I want to be a part of this. So I changed my university degree to psychology because that felt like the best fit to get into sexology. And then just went full sexology mode. And yeah, here I am.
Wow. So you got put through the ringer, like not once, not twice, like potentially 3, 4 times, right? With all of the experiences with STI from a partner, which sucks, right? That always sucks. It's a little salt in the wound there, right? And then through like searching around, you found like people talking about not just STIs and all of those things, but like you mentioned the sex positivity angle, right? So you saw this
Yeah.
huge conversation and then that sort of drew you in. So then once you had kind of handled your situation, what happens then? Are you change your degree, and then do you immediately start noticing like, oh wow, like people are having better sex, people are having more sex than I thought? Like what really blew your mind about that world when you stepped into it?
Oh, that's a great question. I
We try.
think the thing that probably blew my mind was just how diverse everybody's sex lives are. How diverse, like, the like sex toys. Oh my God, so many sex toys. I was like, I didn't even know. Even now, I still find new things being made. And I'm like, what the fuck? I was like, how? How did you even think of that? So I think just the more I looked, I was like, oh my God, kinks, fetishes, like there's all this stuff out there. And like, I've always been a very curious person, but I think it's like seeing it. And I think it was also just like seeing these people talk about these things that we're not meant to talk about and doing it in such an empowered way. I was like, I want to be like that. Like, I want to be able to have these conversations because like, fuck this idea that I'm not allowed to talk about this. And even then, like when I started, because I started my own podcast 2 years ago, so I could set myself up because there's no jobs as a sexologist really in Australia. You have to like make the job. So when I like started that, even just the fear of like, oh my God, what if like, can I even get a job now? Because I'm not like my casual jobs and things. I was like, when people find this, am I gonna like instantly be on like the black ban list? Is this gonna be like bad for just to have against my name? And like, I guess all these other things like started coming up. But then I guess I had to think about like, no, there's these people doing it. There's a place for me to do this. And if people have a problem with it, they can fuck off.
Yeah, no, I love that. If people have a problem that they can fuck off, I'm totally in agreement with you there. I mean, I think to do what you do, right, and especially everything you just said, how there are no jobs in where you are for sexologists, and you do sort of need to borrow that fucking like rock star energy, like fuck off, like you can get out of my way, I'm gonna do this anyway. And I think so much of sex has that rock energy in it, right? And it's so important. And if you don't have that, you almost like are at a disadvantage because you're shy, you don't want to talk about it, and all of these things. So was there anything that helped you, right, in the beginning, like whether it was self-talk or friends or maybe something you read that like motivated you to really stay in it and stay honest and really go after it with that energy? Or were you already like, fuck it, I'm in there? Like what got you to that?
I guess when I started talking about it with people around me, people were just starting to open up. Like even just talking about the fact I had chlamydia, people started being like, oh my God, I had that once. I haven't been able to talk to anybody about it. So the more conversations I had, like people were just so receptive. Like they just want to talk about sex. Like this is the one topic that everybody just wants to talk about. Everybody thinks they're broken generally in some aspect with their sexual sexuality and want to be told that no, you're fine, you're normal. So people just wanted to talk about it. So that was really like motivating. I think the big thing was when I started the podcast, because I started talking about this with people in the industry and I was like it was like I was high. Like I'd finish an interview and I'd feel so fucking high on life. And it also probably helped that I started it during COVID, so I couldn't see anybody. I was like didn't really have to go out into public and have people look at me and be like, oh my God, she's that sex freak that's like talking about all these crazy things. And so it was kind of felt like I was in my own little bubble. And especially because like I grew up on a farm in like a small country town. So it was very slut shaming energy there, very closed minded. So I was kind of like terrified of like, what's going to happen when this gets back to home? Because I had moved away. So I was like, oh my God. And I was even talking to somebody last night about when I started it. And they're like, yeah, like I had like 5 different people sending it to me being like, what the fuck is this? Like the absolute scandal. So I think it kind of helped, honestly, that I kind of was isolated in a sense so that I could kind of just do it and not think. However, once I started having all the conversations and actually like we could finally go back to the pub and drink and do all these things and have people around us, I only got positive responses. So that was like really, I guess, motivating, but it can be quite isolating. Anybody who works in this space, it can be quite isolating, especially starting if you don't know anybody else in the industry. So you really, I guess, just have to like just back yourself, know what you're doing is going to have a positive impact on somebody, which can be hard. It's not until sometimes you get that message or somebody says something, but I think, yeah, you just got to find the way that you can do this work in a way that gives you energy, I guess, to motivate you.
Yeah, I mean, incredible answer, because I think that goes right along with sex and being a sexologist, right? You want to stay true and stay positive in a way, but you want to like sort of put your own spin on it, right? And do it your own way. And that is like such an internal, personal, intimate thing. And to tie back to what you said before that, like everyone thinks that they're broken, right? Like sexually and all these things. Do you think that not being able to get in touch with that intimate side around sex and to be able to talk about it and whatever, do you think that people feel broken because no one's talking about it, or do you think there's something like far more nefarious, more evil at play there?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is people aren't talking about it, because if you're not talking about how other people are having sex or living their life and you do something that you think is weird or you've never heard of before, like you're just going to think that, oh my God, I'm not normal, I'm broken. So I think the biggest thing is not talking about it. But then obviously that comes from like a patriarchal society, and we're looking at it from this like big macro perspective. It's 100% like society we've been built on, the not talking about it, the shame that there's this one way to have sex and this one type of sexuality. I feel like often sexuality is just like, so we have like men's sexuality and then like men's light sexuality, which is like the female sexuality, which is meant to just be the exact same, but just like another little version of it, which obviously isn't the case and creates a lot of problems. But I think the main thing is just not talking about it, because as soon as you start having these conversations, you can start to first unlearn what you think you know about sexuality and everything you've been taught that isn't correct, and then relearn I guess, a way that to be more sex positive. And yeah, because there's literally like, there is somebody else who will have experienced the same thing or have the same desire or have sex in the same way or have the same type of like sexuality. Like there's somebody else out there who'll be the same.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of your work, right, looking at your Instagram, looking at everywhere you're posting, I think, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on that speaks to what you just said, big time, right? And one of the things, and you said earlier, like when you got into it, you're looking around at sex toys, like, what the fuck is this thing? Where did this come from, right? And so for me, even like as a guy, like I just saw like a couple weeks ago, they're building blowjob machines. Like, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in the rise of the blowjob machines, right? Insane. But on your page, you are very sex toy positive. In your work,
Yeah,
you're very
absolutely.
sex toy positive. So this question is kind of a two-parter, but one, why are sex toys so important to the intimate? I mean, pleasure, sure. Everybody wants to get off, everybody wants a nut, sure. But like, why are sex toys so important to anyone, to any gender?
I think they provide an opportunity for you to experience pleasure in the way that you want to, and that might be unique to you. For some people, it can be like really supportive to their, say if they're a queer person, either to their gender, their sexuality, to be able to express it in a way that I guess goes against society and what they expect of them. I also just think that like especially a lot of vulva owners, they really struggle with stimulation without sex toys, because often their context isn't right. They haven't had enough time to build arousal. We live in like this society that's just go, go, go. So you don't really have the time to just lie there for an hour and build your arousal for 45 minutes so that you can finally feel something when you touch a clit. So sex toys kind of provide, I guess, different ways to experience pleasure. It can be quicker, more efficient, more fun, diverse, and often it just can take your pleasure practice to the next level. Like it kind of just amps it up.
Yeah, and I think, there's a couple things there, right? And I said rise of the blowjob machines, and there's blowjob machines for women, there's blowjob machines for men. And that is something I think is new, not necessarily maybe this year, but like the last couple years, sex toys are getting bigger and better. Like you said, you're like, holy shit, what the fuck? I didn't even know that they could build something like that, right? So, and that's a good thing, but people would like push back on that and say, oh, like, well, how are you ever going to get off with a normal person if you're using all these electronics and whatever? So like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I love this topic.
I guess the first thing is like we have this such a pressure to like have orgasm as the goal, which does not have to be the goal. Like for a lot of people, like if you're going into sex with this as like my main focus, that therefore generally means, especially if it's like cisgendered heterosexual sex, that sex is going to then end when the penis owner comes generally, or that when you do orgasm, if you're both orgasming, that like that's the end, like, which is just not the case. Like there is so much pleasure to experience beyond that. So I just think that, yeah, for starters, we shouldn't be making orgasm the goal. And they should be seen as like an ally, a tool. Like, why do you feel so insecure in yourself that you feel like you have to be the one to be able to get off this person or get yourself off? Like, you're allowed to use tools. It's like if you're building a house, you use tools to help you. You don't just have to use your fucking hand. Like, it's not practical. So I think for some people, it just, I guess, threatens maybe how they feel capable with this, like the sex that they're having or how they're performing. And like for some people who think like it's just like not natural or whatever, I'm like, nothing is anymore. Like we have these things, let's fucking use them. Like, yeah.
So when they build the metaverse, right? When we go full fucking virtual reality, are you pro like sex in the metaverse? Or are you sort of like, that's where I draw the line? Or like artificial intelligence? Where are we at with this?
I feel like I'd have to experience it before I could say. And because like honestly, like if they could plug something into my mind and it's going to be the most mind-blowing insane sex, fuck yeah, I'm going to do it. Like if it could take it to that next level, why, like, absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's a fucking great answer. Wonderful answer. Because right now, like you're seeing at least all over my social media, like the AI, like drawings that people get the app and it'll draw you into 50 different ways or whatever. And there's a lot of people who are against it. They're like, don't support that, support human art. And I'm like, oh my God, wait, we are in the moment. We are in the movie right now where people are like, support human art. And I'm like, hang on a minute. I have a sex podcast. This is crazy because the next thing is probably going to be, have sex with humans, not with robots. And I know like, the sex robots are coming regardless, but I just think from someone who, someone who is as professional as you and has all the knowledge, I think it's good to hear that you want to experience it first, right? Like there isn't, we're a little early to the conversation, I think. I mean, I think in 5-10 years, AI, sex robots could be wild, but also could be a lot of fucking fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you can't diss something till you try it. And like maybe even try it twice. Because sometimes often, especially with sex, the first time it can be like, oh, this is weird, I don't know. And then the second time you're like, oh, okay, I'm getting into it more. So I feel like often it's not even just trying something once, because it often takes some time to like, get used to that new sensation or whatever is going on. So like, yeah, absolutely. Anything that's new, like I'm so open to trying it, because I'm like, why would I like limit my sexuality to like this box when potentially I could try one thing and then all of a sudden it changes everything.
Yeah, no, great point. And I think, you said the thing about not setting the bar at orgasm. This keeps coming up on my podcast since the very first episode. And this is something that I struggle with as a person, right? In my relationships and in my sexual exploits, whatever you want to call them, right? I was always thinking, well, the experience sucks unless she gets off. So I was like bending and contorting and working myself into situations, and I wouldn't give up until my partner would have an orgasm. And it was a real one. And that became a thing where now I'm in a relationship and I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Why am I being so performative? It really took a long time. And I'm actually just like recently sort of like trying to unlearn all that performative bullshit. But I think it comes from, in my experience, and I would love to get your thoughts on it, but like, it comes from like the fear of maybe like, oh, you suck in bed, right? So how do we, as a sexologist, how do we take that fear out of it? Like, if you're a woman and you want to please your partner, if you're a man, you want to please your partner, whomever, whatever gender you are, how do you step into a situation where you really do want to make your partner happy, right? You want them to come, but how do you take that performative piece out of there?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to partnered sex, the biggest thing you can do there, like if your main concern is like, I want to put on the best show possible for this person, you need to communicate and know what creates the best show possible for this person. Because so often people jump into sex and they just do what they think the other person's going to like. They do what they know worked on the last person. They do the new thing they just saw on the porn they watched. Like, they try all these things, but unless you're communicating, you're not going to know. So if you're wanting to, take that anxiety out, literally ask and do it during, like, talking during sex can be sexy, and you can, it doesn't have to be this like, oh, does that feel good? Like, oh, like, am I doing this right? Like, you can make it sound better. And just, yeah, 100%, I think it all comes down to communication, and like during sex, asking, getting them to show you, like if you're, I don't know, giving somebody a hand job or something, get them to grab your hand and guide you. So you're doing it exactly how they want it done. Because even if somebody does still tell you like, oh, I like it when you do it like this, it still can, that's your interpretation of what this is. So then getting them to actually show you, and it takes time. Like, it's not something that you can just like do once. You might be lucky and like you're like, yep, my anxiety's gone. It's like anxiety with everything. It takes practice. Often with partnered sex, it can take having sex with somebody so many times before you finally get like, yeah, we have our flow. This is what feels good. We know how to do this. And I think the main thing is just like, take the goal of orgasm away and just the goal of pleasure, and get any like restrictions you have in your mind of like, this is how somebody experiences pleasure, get rid of it, because you could find out that you could like lick somebody's elbow and it's like insane. So like, I think just being really open and curious, somebody's whole body can be a vessel for pleasure. And I think once you take away like any expectations, any like ideas and rules that you have in your head, and then like communicate with your partner of how the whole experience is feeling. Also, after having that conversation is really important, like after sex. And if that's a sensitive conversation, doing it out of the bedroom, because often we're quite like, can be a bit more, I don't want to say the word sensitive, but like there's so many things going on, so many hormones, all these things. So having that conversation outside of the bedroom of like, okay, what did we do well? What can we do better? What did I enjoy? Like, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, okay, so let's take everything you just said and everything we talked about with the sex toys. Wouldn't it make sense to fucking normalize using sex toys with your partner if you want them to get off, and it doesn't have to be some personal indictment every single time? I think if you could talk about how do we normalize that? Because I think a lot of men, but also just people, right? They feel threatened by their partner wanting to use a vibrator or a blowjob machine or whatever it is in the fucking in the bedroom while it's whatever. But like you said before, they're your allies. So how do we do that?
Yeah, so I think it's once again like talking about it, getting exposure to them, seeing how they work. I think a lot of people just have a fear because they don't know how they work. The amount of men I've given my vibrator and they look at it and like, what the fuck do I do with this? Like, how do I turn it on? How do I use the levels? So not maybe just throwing it at them in the bedroom and being like, use this, setting some time beforehand to actually be like, okay, this is what it is. This is how it works. Show them how you like to use it. And then just, I think, having that conversation so it's not as scary. Because I think for some people too, if they're literally just throwing it in the bedroom, they've never used one before, and then they feel like they're not doing a good job, they feel like they're uneducated on how to use it, sometimes that can then, I guess, build that wall of like, nah, sex toys, they're not it, like, you know, and kind of threatens them, I guess, in a way. So I think having that conversation, showing them, and it's really just education and exposure, seeing that other people do it, that like, I think that that's the main thing. Like, we're just seeing more and more that like so many people use sex toys. Like, literally majority of the people I know in my life are using sex toys. So like, I think that we're very much like humans, we like to follow the crowd. So I think once that, you know, it's kind of normalized in that sense, then it will just hopefully just come with it.
Yeah, hopefully, right? And I do see, I mean, there's podcasts like yours, like mine. There's people doing what you're doing. There's sex toys that are available like through Facebook ads, right? So there is that sort of progress that's like making its way. I think, you know, the thing that people don't realize that I've noticed with people around the show, even myself, right, is when you start opening up about what you want with a partner, and then things just start working, right? Because you're communicating. You and I can sit here all fucking day and say, you need to communicate, you need to communicate. But unless you really actually open your mouth and say, hey, I don't like that. Hey, I like this. I want to have this fantasy with you. And those things start to actually work out more times than not, because you're with somebody for the mutual, like that's what keeps you. That's why you're in a relationship, usually the mutual attractions. And I think when people open up about what they want, they're surprised because that person's like, oh, that sounds awesome, or that sounds cool, right? But it's
Yeah, absolutely.
the mutual attractions have already got you to that place where that person's more likely than not going to say, that sounds hot, let's do it with hot dogs or whatever weird shit, right? Again,
Yeah,
nothing's
absolutely.
weird, but that was a little weird. Okay, cool. Like everyone's into weird shit. Amazing. But I think the part that I was driving at is like the confidence that you have when you know you've been honest with your partner and it worked out and you're both coming is fucking insane. It affects your whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be terrifying to communicate. I can even have an example of last night. I went and had a booty call with somebody who I used to see like a couple years ago, but like hadn't for a while, obviously a while, 2 years. And there was kind of this fear of like, okay, well, I'm now a sexologist now. And I wasn't that 2 years ago. And I can almost see that fear playing out for them of like, where are they at? Like, what kind of, you know, sex is she having now? Is she like this wild kinky thing? Like, you know, just these, I guess I could see, like, they weren't saying it, but you can kind of just sense their energy. And then I generally always have, like, at least in that situation where I know I might have sex with them multiple times, allow them to kind of just do their thing, see what they've got on show. But then I was like, okay, I need to talk about this, because if I have sex with you again, we can't have it like that again. And then, so I made the effort to be like, okay, I need teasing. We can't just go straight into it. By the morning, I had half an hour of teasing. And I was like, fabulous. We had none the night before. Now I've had half an hour in the morning. Communication, it works. It can be terrifying, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to work.
Yeah, and it will blow your fucking mind when you ask for something and you get it. You're like, oh my God, why did I get that? Well, because you asked for it, right? And you're right. It is so fucking hard to communicate. But once you break that barrier and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to do this with everybody, not just sex, but like life gets so much easier. It just is one of these,
Absolutely.
it's just one of these things that it's like, oh wait, I wish I would have known this earlier. But it's like, oh my God, I've been being told that by everybody. I just haven't really truly listened. So listen to us, guys. Go out there, get what you want by asking for it. I think that's huge. Are you telling like a lot of your clients to do that, to be really straightforward from the rip, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because I think with sex, I don't know if it's just the sex that we're having in Australia, but often like we get quite repetitive and we kind of try and, I feel like we go off the first one and kind of build on it, but it often stays quite similar unless you're like somebody who's really curious and actively trying to have different sex. So if you set the standard of this like pretending to like what's going on. They're going to do it the next time because they're assuming that, oh, they like that. So then you're going to have that the next time and the next time. And that's like with faking orgasms and things. I will never understand it because I'm like, you're literally just teaching them how to not have sex with you. Like we can't be doing that. Like that's why communication, I think, is just so important, because once you set that standard, especially from the start, it also provides them with the opportunity to come at you with like, what do they actually want too? Because often I find, I don't know if it's because most of the sex I have is with men, they're not the ones to instigate that communication. But if I open up that conversation, then often they don't even know what to say because they've never even thought about it. Like they have never even thought of like, what do I like? What do I not like? And then they get that opportunity. They can, go away, think about it. And then it just leaves that door open so that you can have more of those conversations later on.
Yeah. And I think, we've been driving at it this whole time. But you do have some content on your Instagram, and the statement on there was, the more we don't talk about sex, the more harmful it is. And I think, is that something that drives your work to talk like we are now about sex, to normalize it, but just at its very most like boiled down basic, to just talk about sex more, to be honest, to have the communication, but to have open conversations with your partner, your friends, whomever? How much of that, because it does seem like it is a theme that runs through all of your content and your work, right? And again, like we've hit it a couple times without actually saying it, but is that something that drives you? And how harmful is it truly to society, to the world, that sex has been vilified and not talked about so much?
Well, I think the main thing is, until we have a sex education system that is just amazing, until we have that, we have to talk about sex, because there's just so much misinformation and things out there. Maybe if we get to this society where we're just like super sex positive, there's all this great sex education out there, I imagine we'll still be having lots of conversations about it because it won't be shameful. But until we have this like amazing world that therefore it doesn't matter if we're talking about it or not, because we have the knowledge and we have the resources, until then, like, we have to talk about it. And it's something that I've just always done. I've put myself on the line too, like the amount of personal stories I've put out into the world, because I was like, even though this might be like, other people see this as like detrimental to my like reputation in a professional sense, I'm like, somebody has to do it. Somebody has to talk about this so people understand. So I think that's definitely a big thing. And I just think, until we get to a society that, is sex positive, does have the good basic, pleasure-based education, especially, like, we have to talk about it. And until then, people will probably see sex as this big, scary thing. But that's, I guess why we need more conversation, so it isn't that scary thing.
So that being said, what do you think is working against it the most? Is it politics? Is it, what do you think it is?
I definitely think politics. Like, I'm seeing it even like in Australia, the criminal justice system, politics. I think also just like some in just like older generation that are just like, and parents even who are just terrified that if we talk about sex, therefore their kids are going to get pregnant, they're going to get STIs, they're going to have all these terrible things happen to them, which is just not the case. Like, there's so much research out there now that shows that the more comprehensive sex ed there is, all of the things that they're scared of decrease. So I think the biggest thing is honestly probably politics, because we are having like social media and stuff that's really pushing against this. But until we have these big old systems change, we're probably not going to see like a massive change for everybody. It'll more just be reaching certain populations who are either looking for this information or are, I guess, a bit more open to it.
Yeah, and also too, like, do you think religion is a big piece of that as well?
I think so, especially if we're looking worldwide. I think religion is. I don't think religion has as big of an impact in Australia. But I think when you're looking worldwide, absolutely, because there's certain countries that like it. I think it's going to take just even so much longer. But I think it's also the mix of religion and politics, because like there's some, like when you go back in history, like their dildos were created like literally like thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. Like we used to have like more pleasurable sex. I was listening to like a podcast the other day. They were talking, I think it was like ancient China used to get buried with all your sex toys. And I'm like, that is amazing. So we definitely have the capacity to do it. We've gotten lost in this like somewhere in the middle and we've gone backwards. So I guess it's going to take time. I feel like I won't see it in my lifetime, but maybe the next one or the one after that, fingers crossed. But yeah, I feel like it's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah, and in America, it is totally the twisted hybrid of politics and religion for sure. I feel like religion powers that, like, no, sex is bad, blah, and then politicians are like, we need to scare people into, and then you have a bunch of GI Joe dudes like outside of a drag brunch and like blowing up like power plants and shit is what's happening right now, which is the idea that it's all from fear around sex is absolutely just insane to me. And I think that's what's powering it in America. It's really interesting to hear what is powering it and what isn't in Australia. You guys seem a bit ahead, at least in certain areas, and I think the fear piece is what is really scary. And some people are even afraid, and maybe you're seeing this with your clients, but like masturbation, having a regular masturbation practice, whether that's like with a sex toy, whatever, partners, porn, not porn, whatever it is, just having something regular to allow yourself to feel pleasure. And you have a lot of content on that. How important is it if someone doesn't have a regular masturbation practice? What do you say to them?
Yeah, so I think the main thing, like the reason I think masturbation is such a powerful tool is because you get to learn and understand your body. And if you can learn and understand your body by yourself, then you can take that into partnered sex. Now, obviously, if you just have like this amazing partner or partners and you're having the amazing sex, you're exploring yourself during that time and you feel like you're really getting to know your body, amazing, then you don't have to masturbate if you don't want to. But I think it can be such an empowering thing to really learn about yourself, your pleasure, what you like, what you don't like. It's often the most safe place as well to do so. Like if you're somebody with trauma, you're completely in control. You're the one who's doing whatever you're doing to your body. If you want to, and like things like say ass play, say you want to, try ass play, that can be terrifying to do that with a partner first, especially if like you've, obviously never done it, but if you've never, had to do like the whole like cleaning process, if that's something you do, and like just all of that stuff. So then being able to do that by yourself first to like know how your body's going to respond, being able to relax more, not having that added pressure of like, oh my God, somebody else is there, I'm going to tense up, I'm scared of this happening, I'm scared of this happening. Just doing it like with yourself is like the safest way to first try something, to then take that into partnered sex. So therefore, like, how your body will most likely respond if something does happen where you then get like maybe performance anxiety, or like you're aware of your body, or you might be like self-conscious, anything like that comes up. You can at least know, okay, well, this is my base of like, I know how this should be. I can now deal with this with either like mindfulness, or maybe we'll talk about this. But then it's not just these added fears of like, this is something completely new. I'm also terrified of how my body looks like this right now. I'm also scared, say we're doing ass play for the first time, that shit's going to get everywhere. Like having all these extra added fears.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? To tie all of it together is like there is these, there are people out there who, like I said, they don't have a regular masturbation practice. They are afraid to start it, and there is all of this fear around everything, right? So if someone comes to you and they're like, hey, I just feel guilt or shame or weird about it. They've never tried sex toys. Like, what are the beginner processes, right, that you would recommend? Like, here's how you get started knowing your body, knowing whatever. Because I think, just to nail the bullseye as a podcaster here, right? I think when you get to know your body, like you said a lot of really important stuff, but then you then know what to ask for with a partner. you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the main thing, if you're somebody who has a lot of shame, or like it's something that scares you, it feels gross, it feels dirty, whatever it is either probably first like to recognize those thoughts. I'm a big journaler, so I think like actually sitting down like, okay, why does this feel uncomfortable for me? What has society taught me? What have my past experiences been? What has worked? What doesn't work? When I'm starting to masturbate, when does it kick in, this like shame, disgust, whatever? Is it before I've even started? If it is, it's probably a lot of like societal things and things you've been told. Is it when you touch a certain part of your body? What is it about this part? Is it using sex toys? What is it that you've been told about sex toys that's making you feel like this? So I think once you can acknowledge or try and like work out, okay, what's actually going on, I think either writing it out, talking to somebody, seeing a sexologist, having somebody to kind of break that down, or having like them kind of identify, oh, I think this could be like what's contributing there. I think that's a massive first step. And then sometimes it's just just practice. Going to masturbate, sitting in that feeling, okay, why is this feeling uncomfortable? Doing some mindfulness, grounding yourself, trying again. If it's something that is like triggering or is not good, obviously do not continue, because you don't want to then have this association of like, oh, this is bad, or my body doesn't respond well to this. So I think that's another like important thing. But I think just like taking your time, being slow, trying to ground yourself, be mindful during the process, and also like just having some compassion for yourself, because these things that have been coming up, like you're not born with shame, you're not born with disgust, you're not born with these like ideas that masturbation and pleasure and things like that are bad things. It's learned. So just having some compassion that you've had to, you've learnt these things. Now you've got to take the time to unlearn it. And it's hard. It takes fucking time. Like I even have random things that come up for me now, and I'm a sexologist. And like, I feel like I've been very open for most of my life because it's so ingrained. So it's just being able to acknowledge that, hopefully be able to express it out in some way. And then, just sitting with it, being curious, trying new things. If it's too much, stopping. But then, it can just take time and practice and just unlearning.
You're amazing. Emily Duncan, thank you so much for being on Sex Party. Where can people find you? Where can people work with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on my Instagram, that's orgasmic, or my website, which is emilyduncansexology.com, or I also have my podcast, that's orgasmic.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love to have you back. You killed it. It's been great.
Amazing. Thank you.
Huge thank you to Emily Duncan for being my guest this week on Sex Party. If you guys are into great guests like Emily, if you are ready to support the show because you love it, because you can't live without it, because you want more, there's a couple different ways you can do that. If you're listening on platforms like Apple and Spotify, you can subscribe to the show. Most importantly, you can leave a rating, you can leave a review, you can tell your friends. If you are watching on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, I love you. Thank you for watching. You can like the video, you can subscribe to the channel, you can leave a comment, you can share. You can share with everybody. You can have some pie. Not sure what that means, but hey, it's there. Have some pie. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you doing these things. You don't have to do anything. You can just sit back, sip an alcoholic beverage, watch the show, listen to the show. That is fine. But if you do, I appreciate it, and I love you, and big things are coming. If you want to talk to me, you could reach out in the DMs on Instagram is the best place. And I will see you right back here next week.
Thanks for listening. The party continues next week. Click subscribe and let's make this a regular thing. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter @SexPartyFM. Follow Dustin @Dustin Rybka.